Our next presentation deals with the Trade Planning Bill of Rights. Our presenter is Chris Rice, VP of Sales and Marketing for Exceedra. Chris, take it away.
Great. Hey, thanks, John, and appreciate everyone taking time out of their busy day to join us here this morning. So I've been in this business a long time. Nearly 30 years ago, I started in the CPG industry as a retail rep for the Quaker Oats Company, and over that time, I've had the good fortune to work for and with many great companies and a lot of very smart people along the way. And I've seen this trade improvement journey from many different angles, from a manufacturer's point of view, from a TPM software perspective, from a data and analytics perspective, and from a TPO perspective. Really, I've spent my entire career kind of working with companies to help them make trade improvements and to help them get it right. And that's why I'm excited to share with you today a new point of view on deploying TPM in a way that enables integrated business planning and lays the proper foundation to build more advanced analytics and revenue management capabilities. So before we jump in, going along with our theme here, before the days of Twitter and LinkedIn, in the early days of the U.S., the town crier was an important source of news for the community. So I'm going to play that role and climb up on my soapbox and deliver my preamble before we start. So we, the people of this great CPG company, in order to form a more perfect integrated business planning process, established that there is a right way to implement TPM, providing interdepartmental collaboration and tranquility, and a simplified and streamlined planning process, and improved deployment of trade resources for all. So with that, let's review the best way to implement TPM to enable that integrated business planning capability, one that supports core TPM and customer business planning, but provides that foundation for embedded analytics and revenue management, and so that you can avoid the pitfalls that can become long-term barriers to your company's trade journey. So you might say to yourself, what is integrated business planning? And according to Oliver White Consulting, integrated business planning is the process that extends the principles of S&OP throughout the supply chain, product, and customer portfolios, including customer demand and strategic planning, to deliver one seamless management process. From an Exceedra point of view, it's a repeatable process to quickly reforecast the business. It takes into account customer business changes and provides the TPM controls to streamline and simplify the sales planning process. And it does this in such a way that it drives the organization towards an alignment on business reforecasting as part of the S&OP process. So really, it's the engine that drives your company performance and helps you get this thing tuned so you can shift into high gear. So likely, if you are listening to this today, is because you see a need for your company to make changes, perhaps, and that's great. Everyone, big and small, has opportunity for improvement. I think there are many reasons for this, and some of that might be because of current planning challenges or process or systems issues. And some of that might be executive mandate to improve the business, and sometimes it's a bit of both. So from the trade planning challenges, these might include things like, it takes too long to enter a promotion or to create a customer plan, or customer planning, quite frankly, is done outside of TPM in Excel, or there might be other offline work streams that were created because of stopgaps, maybe in the deduction management space, or headquarters doesn't really trust the numbers in the system, or even potential reporting lags, or the reports just aren't correct. So a number of those type of challenges. And then from an evolution driver perspective, often this is a executive mandate that says, we're on a mission to improve top line or margins, or perhaps it's a desire to use advanced analytics to become more predictive or demand-driven, or maybe there's a need for more customer collaboration and to improve strategic relationships, or we also hear the need to advance integrated business planning to improve forecasting. So I'm sure each of you could probably add to this list, but whatever the reason, there is a right way to go through this change process to ensure that you have the right foundation. So that's why we're here today, and this approach to review the Trade Planning Bill of Rights, I've separated into 3 kind of logical steps to organize the presentation: prep, deploy, and evolve. And that's not to say that the items on each of these sections aren't tightly interrelated, or it's not to say that they have to follow in this exact order. You can think of this more as my presentation construct to help convey the key message. So with that, we'll jump right in. So the first amendment is the right process. So in the early days of trade evolution, TPM was typically a finance-driven sales tool, meaning that the focus was really put on managing trade overspend, or to get more visibility to customer planning. So you can think control and visibility along with deductions and settlement capabilities. For many, this is where their companies have kind of stalled. So this traditional approach often has forced the larger strategic customer teams to manage their customer planning outside of TPM, or maybe the promise of bringing that in was never really realized. So as this has evolved, we need to eliminate that non-productive spreadsheet planning and support those processes in the system to get this right. This will help improve the process by streamlining the efforts to build the plan. So one example of this process improvement might be requiring field sales to make changes to promotions and plans as soon as they become aware of these, and then measuring that to ensure that the impact of the ROI and profit of those changes are evaluated in the system, and they're visible to the headquarters, to finance, and to demand planning before the promotion is executed instead of after the fact. So customer planning is really a critical element to the overall process, as this is the source of the detail from those that are closest to retailers and distributors. It's really the core foundation that drives the detail, and so more timely updates will absolutely help minimize the surprise. So as we consider this, we also need to take in the other departments and the other participants in the planning process. including marketing and demand planning and finance and supply chain and accounting. And this is where integrated business planning really begins, understanding that process of the annual planning and the in-year S&OP execution, not only from the sales and finance, but from those other departmental points of view. So the first step in this is really to analyze and map your current process to get an understanding of those departmental perspectives and interdependencies. So keep in mind your company, most companies typically have a planning culture, meaning you might be more top-down driven, you might be more bottoms-up driven, and you might have some combination of that in the middle ground. So in the analysis and mapping, you will document the annual planning process and the sales execution process and the S&OP kind of in-year management process to drive the organization to a mutually agreed upon approach for regular reforecasting of the business. So most companies, this exists today. It's critical, but however, most it's typically siloed, an elongated process and often more contentious than it really should be. So the second step in getting the right process is really to consider best practices. So to then compare your current process to understand your organization's maturity and to understand where you have opportunities for improvement. And then the third step is really from there, once you understand the gaps and the opportunities, start to develop your future to-be process. And at this stage, you don't want to sell your organization short on the future state by immediately starting to introduce limitations or barriers and roadblocks. So here, keep an open mind as you're going through this mapping and analysis process. So our motto, during this sort of phase is really no fear of change. However, this only works if the change management impact is carefully considered, and that is a clear part of the path that is charted to address those changes. For instance, if your organization is top-down driven today, and through your analysis you see benefit to become more bottoms-up or a hybrid, this can be a huge change to the sales organization in the planning process. So their skills to become business managers and the KPIs and the performance measurement and the alignment of incentives all need to be considered. So the change management must become part of this process when you're developing that roadmap. So from a change management perspective, this is really critical to make it a sustainable solution that you're deploying. Recently, the Promotion Optimization Institute published an excellent white paper on this subject, and I've summarized some of the key points here. I won't go through this, but I did want to provide this as a great checklist. It's an easy read, and I recommend it before you start any project to really absorb the change management aspects so that can be part of your project. So as we move to the next amendment, it's really get the right data. So typically that starts from a TPM perspective with the master data, products and customers and the sales org, your pricing and cost of goods, shipments, deductions, trade spend, most of which originates from your ERP system. But as we seek to evolve the customer planning process, then you should also consider other elements, data elements like consumption data, retailer POS, wholesaler data for indirects where available. And as your processes and your skill sets mature, then there might be other potential data sources like VMI or continuous replenishment data to help improve the short-term forecast, or competitive info on pricing and ads to help augment your post-event analysis, or even retailer-specific data like calendars and KPIs that you want to use in a joint business planning process. So as we continue to support the broader organization from a finance perspective, you may need to source other data sources to get the P&Ls consistent between the way you look at the business in the TPM system versus the way it's considered in ERP or financial systems. So that might look at other non-trade or other allocated costs. And then from a supply chain perspective, it's critical in this process to get an agreed upon baseline definition, which will help with integration with demand planning. And depending on the organization's desire to improve a customer P&L or understand cost to serve analysis, you may want to consider other customer related costs such as warehousing or distribution and logistics or special handling costs. So keep in mind, data alignment is critical here. So there are many aspects to data alignment depending on which data set you're looking at. But just wanted to highlight, in getting the right data, that alignment is key to ensure the accuracy of the information presented in the system. So the point of this slide is just to show one example and talk a little bit about the complexity. So here we are mapping shipment data to consumption, which is key to the customer business planning process to understand, especially for those large strategic accounts. For those of you that have worked through this exercise, you know the importance of getting it right. There's the products and the customer DCs and the syndicated definitions that all may have differing time periods. All of that needs to be mapped properly so that the field sales and headquarters have the proper views. So it's like much like a car, which is a very complex machine with integrated computers. And you expect every day when you walk out of the office that you can jump in the car and push the start button, and all of that complexity will work together to crank your engine and get you home safely. But when that computer malfunctions, it can wreak havoc on the engine timing or the transmission or even your ability to start the car. So the importance to get this right is really, that data is the fuel to your company's engine, and without the right fuel, then the engine gets gummed up and won't work properly. Which brings us to the next amendment, which is the right hierarchy. So that includes product and customer and your sales organization and even time. This example here is a product hierarchy, and it's very common in a typical TPM deployment to use the ERP hierarchy, which, if it exists, was typically created to support manufacturing and supply chain and finance's point of view. And I've seen this get very complicated very quickly, especially in larger companies that have grown by acquisition, and they've tried to accommodate different elements into this ERP hierarchy. And there are other complexities that can also be added into the process where perhaps there might be multiple case pack options that cross customers and channels. So it's really important, since our goal here is to streamline and simplify the sales planning process as much as possible. So that's why, from a best practice perspective, it really helps to create a planning hierarchy, for the customer team that is mapped back to this ERP hierarchy. And that enables the integration and the translation from a planning perspective into reporting and integration to ERP. And more to come on that. This also enables us to separate out sort of the planning perspective from the different reporting views that will be needed for finance or for marketing or for demand planning. So the importance of getting this right is really getting the right hierarchy. Planning hierarchy is one way to simplify that sales planning process. This also requires defining the right views for each department, which takes us to amendment number 4, which is the right visibility. So as we consider supporting the integrated business planning process, you want to consider other departmental areas and the roles within those departments to keep in mind. We're trying to streamline and simplify. At the center of this challenge is getting the right data at the right level and then mapping it to the right hierarchy by department and role in order to simplify the information that the end user is presented on the screen. So, for instance, marketing may be looking at the business at a brand level in broader kind of time buckets with less detail than, say, the finance department, which may want to dissect your trade spending 10 ways till Sunday in much more detail. This also means accommodating different roles within each department for the differing needs, and that includes sort of read-write access capabilities or reporting capabilities based on their job tasks. So, for instance, a finance director will want a broad view across all of the customers and channels and categories that they have responsibility for, whereas maybe an accounting manager that has a more narrow defined role needs to just focus in on the settlement and deduction side of the process. So the example shown here is a product hierarchy or products, but this also relates to other areas, such as funds and customers and your sales org and your demand plans, etc. So the importance of getting this right, it really helps prevent the misinterpretation or the misuse of information, and ultimately that affects your adoption rate. So without the right level of detail, you can't get to the appropriate views by department and role. So as we shift into the deploy phase here, then really the next focus is getting the right scope, and this is really a balancing act, and we want to consider here that this is evolution, not revolution. So getting the right scope is obviously going to differ company to company, depending on the future state process, depending on the organization's maturity, and depending on the overall change across the board. So the key to getting the right scope is really finding that balancing point between the changes to people, process, and technology in a way that can move the company forward on your trade improvement journey without overreaching. And then balancing that against the impact on business priorities, the expected project return on investment, and the organizational impact and risk. So, for example, if in phase one of a project, to support the integrated process, it may require some changes to the master data or to the ERP system to get it right. And when this is considered holistically, from a scope and timeline perspective, you need to make sure that all those contingent work streams line up in sequence, so not to impact your scope and your timeline. So the importance, why is this important to get right? Too much, too fast is really a recipe for disaster. So finding the right balance between changing processes and roles and jobs and systems with your organizational maturity is critical. So get the right foundation so that you can add more advanced capabilities in an embedded, integrated way. And that takes us to the next amendment, which is the right timeline. So now, following on from the scope discussion, typically the goal of a phased approach is to get phase one up and running in a reasonable time frame with enough value and ROI to ensure user adoption from the start. And one common way we see this is to sync up that deployment with your annual planning process. But it's critical here to point out that we don't want to sacrifice getting it right in order to meet the start of a planning process. So in this example, there might be a desire to have the system live to support next year's planning cycle. So let's just say, for argument's sake, that starts in September, which, kind of backing into the start date based off of the right scope, maybe that project needs to start in March, which means also to get to that starting point, you have to have done that prep work, understand your processes, gotten through a selection process, and contracted with the appropriate partners to help you with that. So it's critical here not to be over aggressive on the project timeline, because you really don't want to shortchange yourself by trying to move too quickly just to get something up and running. So it's better to take a phased approach and get things right, because we all know what they say about first impressions. So this is critical to get that TPM foundation, and then which will enable you to add more sophistication as the organization is ready across your journey. So the importance of getting this right is really finding the balance to ensure you have ample time to deploy your scope and to incorporate the change management. And as I mentioned before, too much too fast is a recipe for disaster. So as we move on to the next amendment, it's the right integration. And this really takes experience to navigate the specific and unique requirements that inevitably exist company to company. The key here is that this process needs to be a sustainable, ongoing process with no surprises. So as you go through that, you need to consider sort of the timing of, prioritize the timing of data visibility. In other words, how critical is a specific data element to day-to-day operations, and then let that prioritization guide the transfer method. So critical updates might be more real-time on demand versus less critical ones that perhaps might be better served in overnight batch. You need an automated process to manage the scheduling and the alerts, and to ensure that any system or process-driven delays in this data integration are known. So for example, if the plan is to source data out of a data warehouse, but there is a one-day lag as data comes out of ERP to the data warehouse, then this is going to have an impact on the timing and the visibility of the data that's flowing into your planning system. So that needs to be well known. And don't be afraid to make changes here to get it right. It might be necessary even to go back and make changes to the ERP system to improve the overall integrated planning process. And as mentioned earlier, sort of that hierarchy mapping is key here to ensure that what is planned can be translated back into the ERP and supply chain system. So why is this important to get right? Because if the integration is not working or was not implemented properly, it will have wide-reaching impact. In other words, garbage in, garbage out. And it also impacts the visibility of reporting and analytics. So that takes us to the next amendment as we move into the evolve sort of phase, and that is the right project review. So again, this is evolution, not revolution. So the right review is exactly as it sounds. So after some period that the project has been up and live, typically somewhere between 6 to 12 months after the initial rollout, the review includes revisiting that future state business process, the gaps and opportunities and the way those were prioritized, review the business case and the benefit, and review that phase one scope that was signed up for, and ultimately get an understanding of the results achieved to date. So this may take some effort to interview and report and analyze, but it's really important to dedicate the time to do this, because this informs your key stakeholders on the results you've achieved, and it keeps management aligned on the next phases, the resources required and the expected benefits. So this may take some help from outside, depending on your resources and the complexity and scope and scale of your business, but it's worth the effort to keep the organization on track. So why is this important? Without it, this may delay or even halt the progress in your trade improvement journey. And it's good project management process to review the results and really earn the investment for the next phase. And often I've seen companies fall short in this area. The next stage of evolve, or the next amendment, is the right roadmap. So this really is a culmination of all of the previous amendments that I've highlighted. So it's really the living charter that guides the change from the business environment and the needs. So we are strong advocates of the crawl, walk, run approach as a pragmatic way to make successful progress towards your project goals. So no more big bang soup to nuts approach. So in this roadmap approach, the first phase should really focus on getting the right foundation in place, which brings in the right data, maps it, establishes the integration, the configuration to the customer planning segments, establishing that solid closed loop process through plan, execute, and analyze analysis of the business. And then progressing to phase 2 and phase 3 adds more capabilities and benefits. Now, this is going to look different company to company based on your needs and priorities and resources and organizational maturity. So a solid roadmap incorporates a plan to improve the process and ensures that people are in the right functions and trained to meet company expectations, thus accounting for people, process, and technology. So why is this important to get right? Well, in the words of the late, great George Harrison, if you don't know where you're going, then any road will take you there. And as we move to our final amendment here, last but not least, the right partner. So the right partner will really help you bring it all together. And they have the ability to understand your business, your organizational maturity, and your desired roadmap. And they bring the deep experience and knowledge base of best practices to help you bridge from your current process. They also bring to you a pragmatic approach to help you find that right balance for your company to make sure that your first phase is successful. They also bring the technology that provides a foundation for you to grow, not an anchor to a point in time that kind of locks you into one way of working. And finally, the right partner does the right thing for the customer. So why is this important to get right? So the difference, this can be all the difference between success and something less. So in conclusion, we've covered a lot of ground here in a very short period of time and hit the highlights. And now you have the trade planning Bill of Rights. So wherever you are in your journey, I wish you much success and trust that this session will feed your thoughts and remind you of some important parts and ultimately will help you along the way. There is an accompanying white paper of the Trade Planning Bill of Rights, which is available on the Exceedra website if you are interested. I want to thank you for attending, and I will now step off of my soapbox, and I'll take any questions.
Sure, Chris. There are 2 or 3 questions that have come in I can pose to you. The first one, there's so much information here. How do you recommend getting started?
No, that's a great question, and you're right. This can seem very overwhelming, but nonetheless, it's critical to keep moving forward. So as I laid out in Amendment 1, really the best place is the process. So understand where your company is at today, highlight the issues and gaps and challenges that you need to overcome. And this should give your organization enough to feed a dialogue about your goals and the resources necessary to attack the problems and to help you start to develop that future state. So good question.
Okay, another one. What about trade strategy changes? That wasn't part of your list.
Ah, okay. Good call out. Yeah, there is absolutely opportunity to make improvements and gain benefit here by making changes to your trade strategy. You know, typically I see from companies that maybe are not interested in changing their processes or their systems. They're simply looking to try to make a quick gain or make some tweaks to get some trade improvement. And I think there's sort of two perspectives on this. One, having the right foundation with embedded analytics gives a company a huge advantage, especially when they're looking at areas like pricing and revenue management. And then secondly, I would say, we have a great partner network that provides a whole range of trade strategy consulting services, and more than happy, if someone attending here has an interest and wants to find out more about that.
Okay, one more question. Please talk about analytics. That wasn't on your list.
Okay, another great question. And actually, I did have analytics kind of bundled in with visibility, and I took it off the list primarily because analytics is really a big topic, and it means different things across departments and across companies. So obviously, to get the right analytics, you need the right foundation. But this also kind of ties back to that process mapping. So part of what, as you go through that mapping process, is to understand your current KPIs and reports that are used to support your planning process and your execution and management. And so I think all I would say there is keep your eye out for future webinars and white papers from Exceedra on that topic.
Okay, that's all the questions that have come in, Chris.
Very good. Again, thank you for attending today. I appreciate your attention, and if you wish, here's my email address. Drop me a line. Love to hear any feedback. Also, the link to our website where there's a number of different resources that can help you along your journey. Cheers.
Okay. Thank you, Chris Rice.